You're now watching Wayback Wednesday, sponsored by Davenport Auto Park, the ride of your life. And also sponsored by Flores Glass, serving the area since 1977 with residential and commercial work.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to another episode of Wayback Wednesday. I'm Randy Adcock. So glad you could be with us tonight. I'm telling you what, if you don't have to go out tonight for anything, please don't. It is pea-thick soup fog out there, I'm telling you. I haven't seen fog like this in some time, but on the way to the station tonight, I was just driving with clenched fists and eyes all squinted down. It's thick fog out there, sure is. So anyway, we're going to go back and revisit a couple of topics tonight that we've talked about over the last few weeks. And before we do that, though, I just want to extend a shout out and a thank you to a couple of our regular viewers who've been instrumental in helping me put together tonight's show. Randy Harrell sent me a couple of really nice pictures that we're going to get to momentarily. And we're going to solve a mystery. I guess you could say a mystery, or maybe mystery is not the right word. We're going to correct an error. Let's put it that way, because in prior shows, I had identified a house in Rocky Mount as a local business, and thanks to one of the pictures that Randy sent me this week, I was able to verify that that house that we thought was a business was never a business. So we'll get to that in a moment too. And also, another thank you to Eric Dawson. Eric helps me out each week with the show. He comes by and gives me tips or calls me on the phone and gives me information. And we were talking about Duke's Luncheonette over the last couple of weeks and where it was located. A couple really neat bits of information came to light that I had forgotten all about. Well, quite frankly, before my time. I'm being perfectly honest about it. The changes that we talked about were before I came along. But in any case, I think we've nailed down with fairly good certainty now where Duke's Luncheonette was. We're going to show you some maps tonight. Going back to the early 1900s up through the 1950s, and kind of give you an idea of how some streets in Rocky Mount used to be before they were changed fairly significantly over the years. So before we get into all that, though, there was a couple of pictures from last week show that I didn't get to. We ran out of time, and I just want to kind of hit those real quickly tonight. So Lee, if you would, put up item number one. This is a picture from the Rocky Mount Record. If you remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the Rocky Mount Record. I've gone back to that book several times over the years, over the last couple of years, I should say. And we've shared pictures and articles and information from that book. But this is one that caught my eye for a couple of reasons. Number one, the building looks so familiar to me. And number two, the address. This article talks about a business that was located at 115 Washington Street. And there you go. There's the location today. And this was actually, I say today, there's actually a restaurant there. This picture you're looking at here now, that's from 2012. If you'll notice, I've got the space itself outlined in yellow there, but on the left-hand side of the yellow circle I've drawn, or oval I've drawn, you can see the old auto equip sign. So right there in the middle, what I've got encircled in yellow was, in 1906, the location for Bullock Bird and Company, which was a furniture store. And over the years, there's been several different businesses that occupied this space. But of course, for probably 25 or 30 years anyway, Auto Equip was in this space here at 115 North Washington Street. So anyway, that was kind of something neat. The building has changed. Lee, if you would go back just for a minute, just for a second, let's look at the original picture number one. And I just want to show the viewers how much it's changed. If you notice, there are 6 windows here now, and you've got 2 openings. This is actually a double-spaced storefront here, and there's 2 openings. But you see there were 6 windows, and at the top they had that archway on top of them. There's some decorative or ornamental brickwork at the very top of the building across the front there. And over the years, this has happened many times in downtown Rocky Mount, these buildings have been rehabbed or refurbished, if you will, remodeled, I guess is a better word to use, and they've consequently changed quite a bit. So now, Lee, let's go right back to where you were just at in that picture of we'll say the modern day. There you go. And like I said, this was actually from 2012. It's not current because today there's a restaurant located in this space here, and the auto equip sign over that's hanging off the side of the wall there has been taken down. And you see it looks now to appear to be 4 windows at top instead of 6. But like I said, the whole facade, the whole front of this store, in fact, has been remodeled over the years and changed, but this is the same space. This building was built, actually, I believe it was 1901, and it was Bullock Bird and Company Furniture Store in 1906. So there we go. All right, so I mentioned at the top of the show that I'd gotten a couple of really neat pictures this week from Randy Harrell, and I was really excited to delve into these and get a look at the details. So Lee, if you would, put up item number 3 on for our viewers there. This picture, we don't have a specific date on it, but judging by the cars, I'm going to guess early 1950s, 52, 53, somewhere along in there. But I want to draw your attention to a couple of things. Number one, this is a Texaco gas station, and the way we know that is because if you look on the gas pump, at the top, there's in that white globe, there's a star, and down below there's the old, like a fireman's hat. And so anyway, this is a Texaco gas station. And directly across the street from this is Johnson Funeral Home, okay? Now, if you remember from a few weeks back, we talked about the Summerlin Funeral Home, and we thought the Summerlin Funeral Home was in a building I'm going to show you in a minute. And actually, what we have determined after looking at this picture very closely and doing some back and forth, the house to the left is still standing today. So in other words, that house that's immediately across the street from the gas station, where it has the clock above the porch there and across, it's hard to read in this picture, I know, but underneath the clock it says Johnson Funeral Home. That house was originally Summerlin Funeral Home. In later years it became Johnson Funeral Home, but that house is now gone. It's been demolished. The house to the left, in the left of the picture here, that house is still standing. And for a number of years, a lot of people, myself included, thought that was the old Summerlin Funeral Home. And of course later Johnson Funeral Home before Johnson built a new space over on Sunset Avenue. So anyway, Randy sent me this picture. And he also sent me this next picture, number 4, if you would, Lee. And this is a picture almost adjacent to this one you're looking at here now. And the way we know that is twofold. Number one, off to the extreme left, you can still see the little pyramid of oil cans stacked up neatly there. And that was the same stack of oil cans that was visible. In fact, let's go back, Lee, just for a second. Go back to the previous picture. And we'll show our viewers, if you look real good in that Texaco gas station picture, you'll be able to see, there you go, in the far left-hand side of the picture, right there in front of that black car on the left-hand side, you see that neatly stacked pyramid of oil cans. Okay, Lee, now let's go on to number 4 again. And this picture is taken just a little bit out, kind of standing in the middle of the street, looking south on Church Street. And you see there the same stack of oil cans on the left there. On the right-hand side, you can see the old Coca-Cola bottling plant. And again, we're looking south on Church Street. And so anyway, I'm not sure exactly where Randy came up with these pictures, but I fell in love with both of them. And you can zoom in on these things, and the detail's really good. I'm fairly certain these are Charlie Killebrew pictures, but they've just got some excellent quality, and it's really good to get a picture where you can zoom in and make out some detail. Okay, Lee, let's move on to number 5. I mentioned that for a number of years, I had always thought this house you're looking at right here on the left-hand side, I thought that was the old Summerlin Funeral Home. And of course, to your right there is the current fire station museum, and you can see Rocky Mount City Hall to the far right of your screen there. But there's a space in between the Firehouse Museum, the Fire Museum, which was up at one time the number 2 fire station, by the way. That brick building was number 2 fire station. But that space in between the fire station and this house you see here was where Summerlin Funeral Home was. And then later, of course, it was Johnson Funeral Home. And that house has now been torn down. Now, I didn't realize until I got to doing the research on this that building where Summerlin Funeral Home, later John Funeral Home, was located, has now been demolished. That was not the original location of Summerlin Funeral Home. And I'll show you in a minute another location where it was. But I was really curious. I thought, okay, so if this home was not the Summerlin Funeral Home, who lives here? Whose house was it? Was it ever a business? And so I started doing some digging into this one house right here just to see what I could find. And the first thing I did was went back as far back as I could go. I had no idea when the house was built, but I said, let's go see how far we can go back and find a reference to this house. So I went back to my trusty Rocky Mount City Directory, and specifically I started out with the 1908-1909 Rocky Mount City Directory. So Lee, if you would put up item number 6 for our viewers. In 1908-1909 Rocky Mount City Directory, the address of this house, which is still standing today, was 430 South Church Street. And what you're looking at here is a page from the 1908-1909 Rocky Mount City Directory. And there you go, Lee. You can see that I've kind of starred them in red on the left-hand side there. There was a Sharon family. Now, I don't know whether or not the Sharon family built this house, but I went to the Nash County GIS website and did a search on the house, and supposedly the house was built in 1910. So I think there's an error there somewhere. I suspect it was built earlier than that, and they've just as an error into Rocky Mount GIS information. But in any case, in 1908, 1909, the Sharon family was living at 430 South Church Street, occupying this home. And so then I started looking. I said, okay, well, let's see how far I can carry this thing and see how far forward I can come, finding out who lived there. Now, you got to remember, a house has been standing for 110 years, 115 years or so. It's had probably dozens of different families and people living in there. I found it was a boarding house for a while with several different people living there. It's obviously a big house, multiple rooms. And so that quickly became a tiring task. But I did pursue it a little bit further anyway. Item number 7, if you would, Lee. In 1925, the 1925 Rocky Mount City Directory, when I did a search for that same address, 430 South Church Street, and you can zoom in on this, Lee, a name popped out at me that I immediately recognized as a local family name. You see where I've got the red star there. Daniel Dove. He was a yard master. He worked at the ACO Railroad. His son, Daniel Dove Jr., worked for the railroad also. And again, this is 1925 now. So I said, okay, I know some Dove. I know a Dove family here in Rocky Mount. I went to school with a couple of Dove family members. And one of our loyal viewers was Bill Dove, who was a former architect here in Rocky Mount, Nash County, bred and born. And so I said, I just wonder if this Dove family here was related to Bill Dove. And so, sadly, by the way, for those that may not be familiar with Bill, he passed away earlier this year at 90 years old. But as I said, he was a loyal viewer of the show, watched the show every week. He would often call me after a show. We'd talk about segments and so forth. I've been to his house multiple times, worked on his computer for him. He was a heck of a nice guy, and he was a history buff, or nerd, if you will, like I am. And so I miss talking with him, having conversation with him. But I continued on my search. Number 8, if you would, Lee. The 1930 Rocky Mount City Directory. The Dove family was still occupying this house at 430 South Church Street. And so what you're seeing here now, Daniel Jr. and of course Daniel Sr., Daniel Jr., William H. Dove. Okay, Bill's name was William H. Dove, and he was a junior. So this William H. Dove in 1930 that was living at 430 South Church Street was the Bill Dove that I know, the architect, his father. So his father and his grandfather, in fact, are listed here in the Rocky Mount City Directory. I wish so much Bill were still here. I could share this with him. I'd like to think, him being a history buff like myself, I would like to think he knew that his grandfather and his father indeed both lived in this house. But I don't know that for sure. And sadly, he's gone on now, so we can't share this information with him. But I just thought it was really neat to be able to tie the two together. Anyway, and so lastly on this little train of thought here, item number 9, if you would, Lee. In the 1940 Rocky Mount City Directory, just out of curiosity, I wanted to see what was going on with this house in 1940. And so when I pulled up the address of, just South Church Street in the 400 block, you see all the red stars there. I put those stars there just kind of draw your attention to the number of businesses. You see 400 block, the 400 address there, Cadell Motor Company. I never knew they were located there. In later years, 400 would have been the home for Marx Brothers Tire Shop. But in 1940, Cadell Motor Company was obviously here at 400 South Church Street. You see 404, it says engine company number 2. At that point was Rocky Mount Fire Department engine number 2. Moving on down, 416, H. Oscar Summerlin, and that was, of course, the funeral home. And then down below you see 422, it says Quinn Funeral Home. So what's odd about this is there's some spaces here. If you scroll a little bit further, Lee, you'll see 430 is also on this list. I think it's off the screen here. There you go, there's 430. By 1940, a Mr. Merriam D. Thomas was living at 430. So what this tells you is that there were some really close together properties here. And in fact, I'm beginning to suspect that perhaps this 416 or maybe 422 may have been directly behind. If you remember from a prior show several months ago, we talked about there was an address, I believe it was 122 Church Street, was an old 2-story house that was located directly behind the Masonic Temple. In fact, we talked about I think it was a German immigrant that lived there. I forget his name now. But anyway, his address was 122, and I think Masonic Temple was 122, or something very similar. But anyway, that house is directly located behind a Masonic Temple at one time. It's long been torn down now. But there really just wasn't enough space between the building on the end where Cadell Motors was originally, and then 430 where this house that's still standing today. You're looking at 4 different businesses, and there just isn't enough room there, I don't think, to get all that in there. So it makes me wonder if maybe one or more of these locations, or businesses or whatever, was located behind the other. I don't know that for sure, and I couldn't find a map that would show me with any detail about what was located where. But again, there was a lot of activity in the first 3 or 4 spaces, if you will, or 3 or 4 addresses on the 400 block of Church Street. Okay. I mentioned that originally at the 400 address, that was Cadell Motors. By 1963, and I'm not exactly sure when they opened there, but I did find this little ad from a 1963 Rocky Mount City Directory, number 10, if you would, Lee. This was the Marx Brothers Tire Service ad that appeared in the Rocky Mount City Directory in 1963. There you go. And you see the address there is 400 South Church Street. So, like I said earlier, I don't know when Marx Brothers came to occupy that building, and I honestly didn't know that Cadell Motors was ever in that space, but they were. And then after they left, Marx Brothers took over the place. And of course, the building's been torn down now, and that space there on the corner. And if you ride by and look at it, I did just earlier, last week now, it seemed hard to believe there was ever a building there. But of course, Hammond Street has been widened a bit since all this was in place there, and so there was more room there between the curb and the fire station back in the 1930s and 40s than there is today. And so there was indeed room for the tire shop and the firehouse will be side by side. And I just realized it's time for our first commercial break. So Lee, bring it back to me. When we come back from the break, we're going to show you some more advertisements. We're going to talk a little bit about a few more ads about Summerlin Funeral Home and so forth. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the changes in some very predominant, I should say, streets in Rocky Mount that changed quite a bit over the years. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more Wayback Wednesday.
Today, having the right healthcare plan tailored to your specific needs is vital to your peace of mind. The question is not if you will need the coverage, but when. And when that time comes, you want to be prepared. With the rising cost of medication, medical procedures, and doctor visits, you should know which is the right insurance plan for you. From life insurance, affordable health care, to Medicare, there are a lot of insurance options available, and choosing a plan can be overwhelming. Having Gus Tullis as your insurance professional on your side will give you peace of mind, because you will know you are covered with the insurance that meets your needs.
Hello, my name is Gus Tullis of Gus Tullis Insurance, and I've been helping people with their insurance needs for well over 20 years. Call me today. I'll answer any question you have. 252-937-6913. Looking forward to hearing from you.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service, we offer refreshments prior to visitations and services of our family, and we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
There's a main nerve that leaves your back that goes into your hip and goes down your leg. It's called the sciatic nerve. A back injury can put pressure on that nerve, causing pain, numbness, tingling. Chiropractors can actually help that. At the Hammer Chiropractic Center on Sunset, we know exactly what to do. We have very good relationships with the doctors in Rocky Mount. We like to co-manage people's care. Some medications may help us do our jobs, and our jobs may help their medications work better.
And we're back. We are back. Before the break, we're talking about the businesses that were located in a very short amount of space there in the 400 block of Church Street, from 400 to 430. There was 4 independent businesses there located, and a residence, I should say, 3 in a residence. But anyway, the Summerlin Funeral Home was there for a good number of years. And I thought that was the original location for Summerlin Funeral Home. The building that we said earlier has been torn down now. But what I came to find out was that it was not the original location. In fact, there was another location, another address for Summerlin Funeral Home just in the next block north. So Lee, if you would put up item number 11, I found this ad in the Rocky Mount Telegram, June the 7th of 1935. And it was just an ad for the funeral home itself. And it says, I'll get up on the screen first and we'll share it. Here we go. It says, full response, our service accommodates the needs of families in every walk of life. Whenever you call upon this organization, you immediately obtain its skilled and sincere interest. This is the home of the Twin County Mutual Burial Association, the oldest association in Eastern North Carolina. Summerlin Funeral Home, 328 South Church Street. And so when I saw it, I said, well, wait a minute. You know, just a minute ago we saw them listed at 422 South Church Street. This says 328 South Church Street. So they did indeed have another location prior to being there beside the fire station. So I kept looking. I found another ad from 1937. Lee, if you would, number 12. This was an ad, and it basically says it's during tobacco season, of course. You think, you know, in August, tobacco farmers come to town with their tobacco, and there's an open arms approach to doing business with farmers in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, because of the amount of money that's flowing freely due to the tobacco market opening up. So this ad was directly, pursuing, if you will, farmers, and it says, the Summerlin Funeral Home extends a cordial welcome to the farmers of this section and surrounding territory. Sell your tobacco in Rocky Mount. For funeral or ambulance service, local or distant, day or night, call 118. I love those 3-digit phone numbers, 118. And of course, you see the address there is 328 South Church Street. So, you know, for a few years anyway, they were located at the 328 address before they moved a little bit further south into the 422 address. So then I went looking, okay, well, where was 328 and what's there now? So when I did a Google search for 328 South Church Street, lo and behold, Lee, let's put up item number 13 for our viewers. What I found, I kind of had to do a chuckle because I had forgotten that before the city of Rocky Mount built their Taj Mahal, that there were other things there. And what you're looking at, of course, you're looking north on Church Street, and to your left there is of course, Rocky Mount City Hall. But this was, in 1937, the location for the Summerlin Funeral Home before they relocated further south into 400 block. Okay, Lee, let's go on then. Item number 14. This was the last ad that I found for the 328 address, and it's just advertising the fact that and again, it's in August. This is of 1942. The other ad we saw a moment ago was from 1937. So they were there for a good 5 or 6 years anyway at 328 South Church Street. But again, it's another ad targeting the local farmers, and it says extends a cordial welcome again to the farmers of this section and surrounding territory. And you see that at the very bottom there, the address is 328 South Church Street. So yeah, they occupied that space for, as I said, 5 or 6 years, and I'm not sure why they moved. But by 1945, they had indeed moved. And so, Lee, item number 15, if you would. This ad I found, and it's almost identical to the previous ad, even down to the Mr. Johnson, who was the owner of the funeral home at that time. By the way, it was still being identified as Summerlin Funeral Home, but Mr. H.B. Johnson was the owner, even going back to 1937. I believe I'm correct there. 1942, he was the owner. 1937, Mr. Summerlin was still on it. Mr. H.O. Summerlin had it in 37, but by 42, Mr. H.B. Johnson had it, and of course by 1945, he still had it. And by now, of course, the address is 422 South Church Street. So it had, of course, by now moved, and Mr. Johnson was running it. And if you remember from, a couple of months back, we talked about the progression, if you will, of Johnson Funeral Home from taking over the Summerlin Funeral Home to eventually Mr. Johnson opening up a brand new funeral home over Sunset Avenue. And I found this article, lead number 16, if you would. This was from May of 1950, and I was surprised it didn't have a picture of the building itself. But this is just I'm not going to try to read it, it's too long. But anyway, just the headline reads, "Public invited to inspect new Johnson Funeral Home." And this appeared May the 5th of 1950. And there you see Mr. H.B. Johnson, who was the president of the funeral home. But this was when they opened up the brand new place out on Sunset Avenue, there in the old Kmart shopping center. It's a very long article, and it just talks about his history in the business, and goes on to talk a little bit about him personally. So, since there was not a picture of the funeral home in this article, I actually had one from the previous show we did that was talking about the funeral home. So, Lee, if you will, let's go ahead and put up item number 17 for our viewers, just to refresh people's memory. This is the funeral home, and you see now it's called Memorial Funeral Home Incorporated. So it's actually Sunset Memorial is what it's referred to now. But this is the building that was built in 1950. Mr. Johnson built this building. And from 1950 up through the 70s, it was Johnson Funeral Home. And of course, it stayed vacant for a number of years. And then these folks have got it now and done some remodeling and refurbishing and so forth to open it back up as Sunset Memorial Funeral Home. But that's not the end of the story for Johnson Funeral Home. If you recall from the last show we had, we talked about funeral homes, and in particular Johnson Funeral Home. There is a brand new Johnson Funeral Home in Rocky Mount, number 18, if you would, Lee. And this is just, there you go. It's across town. It's on Fairview, I think it's Fairview Road. But anyway, this is the new Johnson Funeral Home, if you will. And they've also got the old Bowling Funeral Home. So anyway, so as I said, the Johnson Funeral Home took over the Summerlin Funeral Home, and that's unfortunately a service we're all going to need at some point, I guess. But anyway, moving on, Eric and I talked a couple times this week about the Duke's Luncheonette. That was something that a business I'd never heard of prior to uncovering it a week before last. And so since then, Eric and I both kind of been on a journey trying to find out, as much as we could about it, where it was located and so forth. And we uncovered a couple of interesting things. I say we, Eric and his brother got together and they were talking, and Eric called me. And, one of the things that made it kind of difficult because the streets have changed around a bit since the Duke's Luncheonette was in business back in the 1940s. And so I went digging for some maps to see if I could kind of get an idea of how everything was laid out during the time. And this map here is from 1950. It's a 1950 map. And I've kind of highlighted a general area there in yellow, and that what's in red is not the location for Duke's Luncheonette. I emphasize that area because that is where George Street dead ended. George Street in 1950 dead ended at Eastern Avenue. Of course, now George Street goes on through and goes on up north. But in 1950, and if you kind of zoom in, Lee, where that red X is, that red X, as best we can tell, was the location for Duke's Luncheonette. I'll draw your attention off to the left of that red X. That's Thomas Street coming in there from the west. And then, of course, Raleigh Road, as it was called at that time, or Raleigh Street, I should say, comes in from your bottom left-hand side of your screen and goes up diagonally to your right. There you see the red X, kind of a little above and to the right of that red oval. The red X is where the Duke's Luncheonette was. That red oval, again, is designating where George Street ended. In 1950, it dead ended right there at Eastern Avenue. And then, so now it's totally different. George Street, of course, cuts on across there and comes in right there where that red X is. But that red X in 1950 would have been where Duke's Luncheonette would have been located. So while I was on the hunt at maps and looking at old maps, I stumbled across another map that I forgot I had from 1957. And it's a very similar map, but it gives a little more detail. So Lee, if you would put up item number 20 for our viewers. In 1957, this map gives a little better, a little clearer picture. And you can see there, same scenario. The red oval designates where George Street comes in and dead ends right there at Eastern Avenue. The red X off to the right a little bit of the red circle would have been the general location of Duke's Luncheonette. And we know that because the description in one of the ads was directly across the street from where Thomas Street enters Raleigh Street. And so right there above the red X, coming in from the upper left-hand side of your screen, coming in roughly northwest to southeast angle there, you see that's Thomas Street. And so right there where Thomas Street comes into Raleigh Street, again, the red X designates roughly where Duke's Luncheonette would have been in the 1940s and until it went out of business. So I mentioned that George Street dead ended there at Eastern Avenue. Well, there was a whole lot of things that were going on with that whole area of George Street particularly because of the overpass that was built down from Church Street over the railroad tracks over to George Street. And so I went looking to see how all that was prior to the overpass. And so I found a 1912 map that gives a really good picture of how Raleigh Road was before the overpass put into play. And like I say, this map's from 1912, and I've highlighted in yellow Raleigh Road, or Raleigh Street would come in from the bottom left-hand side of your screen there. Actually, I've got it highlighted in yellow, and it would come in at a roughly northeasterly track and come across the railroad tracks, makes a hard right turn down Edgecombe Street, makes a hard left turn there on Arlington, goes up to Battle, makes a kind of a slanting turn to your right again, and then heads on across Marigold Street, Hill Street, Tarboro Street, and you see it goes on out past Eastern Avenue. And so, again, this is 1912. So, you know, this whole area from Tarboro Street, from George Street back to Church Street has changed quite a bit. You see Pineview Cemetery there in the upper right-hand corner. And everything basically there to your right is all wilderness back in 1912. That cemetery was a right good ways from the city itself. I don't know as far as miles, but it was, like I said, there was nothing else out there. It's a good thing there wasn't, because over the years, Pineview Cemetery has been able to grow and expand and accommodate a whole lot more real estate than it had when it first got started. But in any case, you see there, this is how it was in 1912. So I went looking through my maps again, and lo and behold, I found another map from 1917. And I was really, kind of interested now to see how this came together. So here we go. This is the 1917 map. And you see again, Raleigh Road or Raleigh Street comes in from the bottom left-hand side of your screen. I've got it highlighted in yellow again, like I did the other one. And it takes that same identical track. You see, interestingly enough, it comes in identified as Raleigh Road and exit as Raleigh Street. But you see it comes in there, makes a hard left at Church Street, and it turns right on Edgecombe Street, comes across the Railroad Street, comes over to turn left there, and then comes up a little bit and crosses over to Marigold Street, and then goes on up. And as it goes out of town, you see it becomes Tarboro Road. And so, interestingly enough, it changed names, I guess you'd say, from 1912 to 1917. But that's the path that everything took. So I mentioned a minute ago that there were some big changes underway because of the overpass. So I started doing some digging, trying to find out what I could about how the overpass came to be. And a couple things that I found really interesting was that even though the overpass itself didn't come into being until 1958-59 time frame, the idea of either doing an overpass or an underpass was talked about extensively going back as far as 1935. I found newspaper articles, for example, referencing conversations that took place in the Rocky Mount City Council, or Rocky Mount Alderman back then, where they were discussing in detail with not only local leaders, but the state of North Carolina, Department of Transportation, the Highway Department, and so forth, how to best go about, getting from one side of the railroad track to the other side of the track. And so it became quite a serious matter for a few very good reasons. In fact, one of the reasons was that at one point, the state of North Carolina said, you know what, your train traffic is really interfering with the flow of traffic on what was at that time identified as Highway 95. Not to be confused with Interstate 95, but Highway 95, as it was known. And so because of the train traffic, it was quite often people would be delayed traveling through Rocky Mount. And so the state really kind of got behind this thing and started pushing Rocky Mount City leaders that, hey, you need to do something. Either go over the top of the railroad tracks or go under the railroad tracks, but you need to do something to alleviate this problem of traffic getting backed up by the trains and causing people to be late. Okay, it's time for our next commercial break, so let's go ahead and take that next break. And when we come back, we're going to delve into all the discussion that took place about the overpass/underpass, because there was a discussion about doing both, believe it or not. There was even discussion about moving the train tracks to the outer edge of Rocky Mount. So obviously that didn't happen, but a whole lot of discussion took place, and so we'll get into that when we come back from the break. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service. We offer refreshments prior to visitations and services of our family. And we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
There's a main nerve that leaves your back that goes into your hip and goes down your leg. It's called the sciatic nerve. A back injury can put pressure on that nerve, causing pain, numbness, tingling. Chiropractors can actually help that. At the Hammer Chiropractic Center on Sunset, we know exactly what to do. We have very good relationships with the doctors in Rocky Mount. We like to co-manage people's care. Some medications may help us do our jobs, and our jobs may help their medications work better.
And we're back. Before the break, we were talking about the lead up to what became the overpass, going over the railroad tracks. And as I said, there was a lot of discussion going back to the 1930s. There was so much at stake. In fact, at one point, the state of North Carolina threatened to take the highway designation away from the city of Rocky Mount. But that's how serious it got. Basically, they were saying, hey, if you can't solve your traffic problem with getting people through your town, we're going to reroute that traffic. And they were talking about putting it in Wilson and giving Wilson a designation for that Highway 95. So anyway, the city leaders got together and they had numerous committees. There was 2 or 3 committees created to kind of come up with a solution. And after years of discussion and multiple meetings, they finally decided, yep, let's do this. And between all the different options and locations, because there were several locations up and down the railroad tracks that were discussed as a potential place to put an overpass. Thomas Street being one place. It was ruled out because there was going to be so much width that had to be incorporated into getting onto the bridge and getting off the bridge on the other side, and they had to take into consideration things like property and residents and so forth, and the least intrusive, the least destructive means of getting the bridge over the railroad tracks. So they quickly ruled out the Thomas Street area, but there were other areas that they talked about and looked into. And again, they did discuss going under railroad tracks, similar to what they've done at the Kingston Avenue Tunnel and at the north end by Wholesale Paint Center there. But it would have been a much bigger project, much wider, potentially 4 lanes going under the railroad track. When it was all said and done, it just didn't make sense to go under the tracks. And in 1938, I think it was, they were given an estimate of $500,000 to move the tracks. And so that was ruled out as being just not an option either. So by 1954, the city leaders had come together over quite a bit of squabbling. In fact, it took some arm twisting, I'm sure, and by a vote of 6-1, they decided to move forward. Item number 23, if you would, Lee. This article appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram, August 26, 1954, and the headline reads, "Tentative approval is given to site on Robinson Avenue for rail crossing overpass." Okay. If Robinson Avenue doesn't ring a bell with you, you're not alone. It totally threw me. I said, wait a minute, I don't ever remember hearing of Robinson Avenue. Where was it? What was it? And so I went hunting trying to find out. But anyway, in August of 1954, the local city leaders finally said, okay, let's do this. Let's put a railroad crossing over the railroad tracks, and we'll begin fairly soon. So this was August of 1954 that this article appeared. Okay, Lee, I found the same map that I showed you earlier from 1957. We were looking at the Duke's Luncheonette. I went back and looked at that map to see where Robinson Street was, well, Robinson Avenue was, because I'd never heard of it, didn't know anything about it. Lo and behold, on the 1957 map, number 24, if you would, Lee, I found Robinson Street. And it's actually, it's in an area that you've probably been by there a bunch of times and never knew that there used to be a street there. We talked just a couple of weeks ago about Florida Avenue there that runs parallel to the railroad tracks in Main Street there. It's in a general area of where the train station is. You see Coastline Street there. And of course, Church Street would be to the left there. But Robinson Street was a 1 block long street. And it was right there, you see, in between Coastline Street and, well, actually there was nothing beyond it because the track came across there. But in any case, Robinson Street was where they decided they would begin the work to get the overpass over the railroad tracks, over into Edgecombe County, over to George Street. Okay, so again, much discussion. And I got a little bit out of order here, but let's go lead to number 25. When I put this together, I got my dates a little bit mixed up. But March of 1956, this article appeared, and it says, Alderman approve overpass project in Rocky Mount, state to give aid. And I want to draw your attention to what I've got highlighted in yellow there. Lee, if you could just zoom in on that one part for me. I walked out tonight and forgot my Buddy Holly glasses, so I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage here trying to read. I've got a copy in my hand, but the writing is so small, even in the, there you go. It says the lengthy meeting was attended by some 450 local citizens, many of whom expressed their opinions on the topic. 7th Ward Alderman R.E. Bob Moore cast the only opposing vote. The move by the alderman Thursday night concluded a project which has been in and out of city government circles since 1935. So again, this was something that had been in discussion, had been talked about, had been numerous meetings taking place over the years. There was at least 2 different committees formed to investigate the best way to do this, the best location to do this. And of course, the state was brought in as an advisory capacity because they would obviously be involved anyway. And so there was a lot going on. So, you know, I mentioned earlier that Robinson Street became the location where they decided they would start working on this whole thing. And so when I went looking, I was just curious to see what was on Washington Street in 1957 because I'd never heard of it, number one. Number two, it was such a little short street. There may have been a house or two on it at one time, but I couldn't find any reference to a home ever being on Robinson Street at all. If it was never in any of the city directories that I found. Having said that, I did find a business located on Robinson Avenue in 1955. Lee, if you would put up item number 26 for our viewers. And lo and behold, Langster's Barbershop was located on Robinson Avenue. It didn't give an address. It was a 1-block long street. I guess anybody who knew the area didn't have to worry about finding it. But you see there it says king size. It's bigger, it's better, it looks good like a barbershop should. Lancaster's Barbershop, Robinson Avenue, Rocky Mount, North Carolina. So, as you might imagine, when a decision was made to start the process of putting this overpass into fruition, there were a lot of things that had to be moved. A lot of buildings had to be torn down. A lot of homes had to be demolished. And so it began immediately. I mean, word went out that if you're in this immediate area, you've got to move. We're going to tear you. We're going to buy you out. And there were, money was spent to buy property. I'm sure to some degree eminent domain came into play in some cases. Not everybody was in favor of this, by the way. There was the article earlier mentioned that Bob Moore voted against it. He was very vocally against it for a number of reasons. I'm sure he had his own reasons. But I think the bigger issue for a lot of people was, is there not a better way to do this? Are we just doing something that's going to be a temporary fix and not a real solution here? But in any case, that's where they started. And so literally 3 years before the bridge would ever be usable, before it was ever put into use, item number 27, if you would, Lee, April 8th of 1956, this ad appeared from the Valentine Jewelers, who were located at 600 South Church Street. And I draw your attention to the upper right-hand corner of the ad there, what I've got highlighted in yellow, and it says, "Our building to be torn down for overpass." So, businesses began getting notices. Hey, your building is in the line of where the overpass is going to be. It's got to go. And so a great number of buildings were demolished. A great number of homes, a few dozen from what I understand, were directly affected. Some folks chose, however, to move their home, not just move themselves, but move their home. Item number 28, if you would, Lee. This article appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram August the 18th of 1957. Now keep in mind, the bridge didn't come into actual use until 1959. It was in construction for a couple of years or better. But by 1957, folks are being told, hey, you got to go. Your house or your home or your business is in the pathway of this new overpass and the associated lanes and so forth. So it's got to go. And so this article appeared, and it's a very long article. I'm not going to try to read the whole thing. But at the time this article was written, there had already been 6 houses that had been literally picked up and relocated, and probably another dozen that had been demolished. Because keep in mind, this thing took off from the Church Street area over there, came across railroad tracks and went on around, curved around over George Street. And so there had to be a widening, there had to be room for turn lanes and so forth to get on and off the bridge. So it took a lot of space, and there was a lot of folks, as I said, weren't happy about what had to happen to make this thing come together, but it did. One of the businesses that had to go, like some of the houses had to go, was a motel we've talked about many times on this show, the Pomai Motel. Item number 29, if you would, Lee, for our viewers, put that up on the screen. This ad appeared August 22nd, 1957. Again, this is more than 2 years before that bridge actually became usable, before it was put into service and traffic was allowed to begin going back and forth across there. People in business were being notified that they had to vacate, and the Pomai Motel was one such business. And so they had an auction sale. You see it scheduled there for Saturday, August 24th of 1957. It says bedroom and lobby furniture, fans, heaters, mirrors, blankets, bed linens, lamps and rugs, building to be torn down for overpass. Come look it over before the sale. So rather than relocate, Pomai just folded up their tent and said, that's it, we're done. And so that building was, of course, everything in it was sold out, and the building was in fact demolished. And that was the end of the Pomai Motel. By September of 1957, the bridge had still not been built. Keep in mind, there's a whole lot going on here. Things are being moved, buildings are being demolished. There's a lot of preparation going on, but they haven't built a bridge yet. Item number 30, if you would, Lee. September 20th, 1957, this article appeared, and it says, overpass bids. Rocky Mount's proposed Highway 95 overpass will be among the projects scheduled to come before the North Carolina State Highway Commission for the receipt of low bids and the letting of contracts when the group meets in Asheville on October the 7th. The local overpass construction, which will remove a long-time downtime North Carolina 95 bottleneck, will total a little over a mile, 1.005 miles long, calling for a 1.035-foot bridge to carry Highway 95 traffic over US 301, which then, of course, was Church Street, and the Atlantic Coastline Railroad. The overpass will also include 2 3-foot sidewalks for pedestrians. Approaches at the overpass will be 44 feet wide to allow for turning movements at both ends of the bridge. The job will begin at the intersection of Raleigh Road and Franklin Street, cross 301 and the railroad, and tie back in with Arlington Street. So, like I said, this is 2 years, more than 2 years in fact, before traffic was allowed to start flowing across that bridge, that they had a lot of activity going on, taking bids and so forth for construction work. Item number 31, if you would, Lee. Charlie Killebrew took this picture. It's an aerial view, of course, of the proposed route. This was in November of 1957. Again, no construction is done yet. This is just the proposed route. He flew over the area in his plane, snapped this picture, and then took a marker and marked. What you see there in white is not an actual road. That's where he highlighted the proposed route of the overpass itself. And so you're looking there, it starts off to your left on the Nash County side, and of course extends on across the railroad tracks over into Edgecombe County, and then curves around and joins back in with George Street, and that heads on that way. Okay, by 1958, June of 58, construction had indeed started on the bridge. And number 32, if you would, Lee, for our viewers. In June of 1958, Charlie Killebrew took this picture. And this is actual construction underway on the bridge, the overpass. The bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you can see the piling. Lee, if you could zoom in on that, I think the viewers can get a better view. The picture's a little bit grainy, and now kind of pan down to the bottom right-hand corner of the picture for our viewers, so you can see. There you go, right there. You can see the pilings, the bridge girders, if you will, are being put in place that will hold the roadway, the bed of the roadway, I should say, as it goes over the railroad tracks there. Right there where the overpass goes over Church Street, there was a road, and the road bed is still there. It was called Edgecombe Street. And that Edgecombe Street literally almost caused this thing to have a major problem even after it was built, because there was three local businessmen who had a major problem with the city's plans to close Edgecombe Street. Once the overpass was completed and put into place, the city said, okay, well, we don't need Edgecombe Street anymore. We've got an overpass that goes from Nash County to Edgecombe County, so we'll just close off Edgecombe Street. Well, if you know that area, Ferris Motors sits right there, or did at the time, not anymore, of course, but Ferris Motors sat right there. And Mr. Ferris said, no, wait a minute. We've got folks that are used to coming to see us by coming down Edgecombe Street, so you can't close off Edgecombe Street. And he wasn't the only one. Mr. Holbrook that ran Holbrook Motors said, no. You can't shut off Edgecombe Street. Our customers use Edgecombe Street too. And it got so heated that these two gentlemen and another gentleman hired a lawyer and tried to sue the city. Item number 33, if you would, Lee. Says property owners get order to keep crossing open here. Upper left-hand corner, Lee, that in yellow. Zoom in on that for our viewers. This is the gist of the article. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the gist of it was that these three gentlemen, Mr. Ferris, Mr. Holbrook, and Mr. Bullock was the last guy. These three gentlemen got together. It was Mr. Garner, Mr. Ferris, and Mr. Holbrook. They hired a lawyer and they said, we want to stop the city or the state from closing Edgecombe Street. And so a big hoopla arose from it. As it turns out, it was kind of a moot point anyway, because the other end of Edgecombe Street was literally done away with by the overpass, so you couldn't go all the way through anyway. If you go down there now and look at it, you can turn off a Church Street onto what's left of Edgecombe Street, but you can't go very far. You run into a bridge piling. In fact, item number 34, if you would, Lee, this shows Edgecombe Street today. I actually took this picture today. I pulled it off the internet anyway, but there you go. To your left would be the old Ferris Motors building. You see the overpass there going over. And off to your right there, at the foot of the bridge, that is the old Edgecombe Street roadway that went from Church Street over to Washington Street. And like I said, when they put the overpass in place, the other end of the overpass literally came right through the middle of Edgecombe Street. So whether they closed it or not really didn't matter, because you couldn't go all the way through anymore anyway. Okay, there was a few folks who found some good use for the bridge being there. One was Barber's Auto Supply. Number 35, if you would, Lee. Barber's Auto Supply, for those that remember, that was right there in the curve of Franklin Street at the base of the bridge. And in 1959, May of 59, once the bridge was open, the overpass was open and operational, Barber's Auto Supply put this ad in the paper, and at the very bottom it says, where are we at here? At the foot of the overpass. So everyone by this time knew where the overpass was, knew how to get to it, and so Barber's Auto Supply uses a promotional thing here. Real quickly, throw that last picture up. That's just an aerial shot that Charlie Killebrew took of that area during the 1959 time frame after the overpass was finished. And there you can see it. You're looking roughly north. This photograph runs north-south, and the overpass itself runs from left to right there, crossing over the railroad tracks. This was taken in 1959. Folks, that's going to do it for us tonight. We've run slam out of time. Lee, bring it back to me. I hope you all learned something tonight. I certainly did. It was good to do this research and find out about that whole area down there and how much it changed over the years. Rocky Mount's constantly changing, some for the good, some for not so good, but as the old saying goes, change is inevitable. So anyway, that's going to do it for us tonight, folks. Have a great week. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to one another. We'll see you next week with more Wayback Wednesday. Good night.